David here with Figboot on Pens, back again with not another review, but an announcement about my latest pen project. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the origins of the project. I'll give you an in-depth look at the pen. I'll let you know when and where you can purchase it, as well as show you some measurements and size comparisons, as well as a writing sample. My first few projects have been with Leonardo. Leonardo has been a great partner, and the chances of doing another project with them in the future is very high. But for this project, I wanted to do something a little different. And in order to find something different, I didn't need to look very far. I've teamed up with the North Carolina-based Christoph, whose headquarters and manufacturing facility is only about a half hour away from my house. And my personal favorite of their many models is the 66 Stabilis. In regard to the material, I wanted to use a material that Jonathan and Brooks and I created and was featured in the video I did a while back where I visited his shop and we created a couple of different resins. Now, when I say that Jonathan and I created it, I mean that Jonathan did 99% of the work and he let me stir a few things. I didn't mess anything up, so I at least contributed. So let's take a look at this pen. It arrives in this box, and inside here is a zippered pouch. Now, Christoph has a couple of different pouches they use, so the one you receive may or may not have this exact pouch. This one here is a nice deep blue with the Christoph patch. It's just a quality patch. It's also really soft inside. Also included will be a card from Christoph with the name of the person who tuned your nib. This particular nib was tuned by Mandy, as well as one of my business cards. And then inside here, we have the pen. This is the Figboot on Pens Christoph Model 66 Stabilis in California Sunset. That is quite the long name. I really liked how this material turned out with the swirling reds and oranges. Now, the original name of this material was Padre Sunset. I'm a big San Diego Padre fan, and the material was inspired by this glorious sunset that happened at a game a couple of years ago. I've changed the name to California Sunset for a couple of reasons. First of all, I didn't need to create the product for market that contained a trademarked name that I didn't own. I don't think the Padre lawyers will come knocking at my door, but knowingly violating trademark laws is generally not a good idea. The other reason is that I didn't want to give anyone a reason not to own this pen. If a company made the most gorgeous pen ever made, but the name of it was called the Dodger Blue, then there isn't a chance in this world that I would be purchasing that pen. Sport fans are silly like that sometimes. But I feel California Sunset works well as a name and matches well with my previous release, Carolina Midnight. As I mentioned previously, the Model 66 is my favorite of the Christoph models. It's one of their larger pens. One of their longer pens would be a more accurate statement. I own a couple of these models. There is this one here, which is in the frosted material, and then this one here is in a translucent blue. If you stop by the popular Christoph table at a pen show, they have tester pen sets out where you can test each of the nib options. Those tester pens are Model 66s in straight black. Folks kept asking if they could purchase the demonstrator models, so the Model 66 was born. These are both pens which I have eyedroppered. This is a perfect pen to eyedropper, but more about that later. Let's start by taking a look at the top of the cap. On the top of the cap, it is engraved with the Christoph logo, the F with the 4 diamonds beneath it. This is a clipless pen. The cap is a bit on the short side, especially in proportion to the rest of the pen, but I feel it works well with the overall design. At the end of the cap, it is engraved with the initials FOP for Figboot on Pens. And at the very end of the cap, it tapers down slightly to a fairly smooth transition to the barrel. The barrel contains a single facet, basically a flattened portion. On it, it is engraved with Christoph Model 66. This small facet also can serve as a subtle roll stop, not a prominent one, but it can prevent the pen from rolling around your desk if you set the pen down just right when it is uncapped. I wouldn't say it's intended to be used as a rolled stop, it just kind of works at one. The barrel angles up just slightly until about this point where it tapers down and the end of the cap comes to a small flat point. The cap twists off with a single rotation, and underneath we have a number 6 stainless steel Jowo nib. It's engraved with the Franklin Christoph logo, minus the diamonds, and is available in extra fine, fine, medium, broad, and a 1.1 stub. Franklin Christoph offers a number of outstanding specialty nibs on their models, but for this particular project, we're just going with the standard sizes and grinds. One of the great things about Franklin Christoph is that they have an expert employee tune and test every single nib coming out of their facility. I've never heard of someone having an issue out of the box with one of their nibs. They do everything possible to ensure that you have a great writing experience with their pens. And here's a look at the plastic feed. The section is concave and begins with a single block thread. Then there's a medium-sized step up to the remainder of the barrel. This section is a bit on the short side. Typically, I'm not a fan of sections beginning with threads since I usually hold my pens closer to the end of the section. I do find with this section, it's concave enough that it prevents my grip from slipping too far forward. Even if it does, these blocky threads aren't sharp. So for me, the threads really don't come into play. I do find my grip spills over to the barrel, but the transition is smooth enough that it doesn't feel uncomfortable or impede my grip. I just really like the feeling of this pen in my hand. It's light, but it's not too light. As you can see, this pen is plenty long enough to use unposted. The cap does post, and it does post securely. The cap is very light, so it doesn't backweight the pen or throw off the balance or even add an inordinate amount of length. You hardly feel it's on here. I also like the way the end of the cap is tapered. On tapered barrels like this, most caps have a bit of what I will call a mushroom look to them when posting, and I don't find that this Model 66 has that same look. The transition is smoother, which I like. This is a cartridge converter pen. It accommodates standard international cartridges, both long and short, and a Franklin Christoph branded converter is provided. I mentioned this previously, but this is almost a perfect pen to eyedropper. I say almost because this material is opaque as opposed to something like the frosted ice model where you can see the ink sloshing around in the barrel. When I eyedropper a pen, it's always nice to see your ink situation as opposed to having, shake the pen or something like that. But with the appropriate amount of silicone grease, this pen works really well as an eyedropper. The Figboot on Pens Franklin Christoph Model 66 Stabilis in California Sunset will only be available on my website, figboot.com, and the price will be $175 plus shipping. The very same as any other Model 66 model available from Franklin Christoph. This will be a limited run of 100 units. I say limited run because who knows, at a later point in time, I might make another run of these pens. Franklin Christoph has historically produced retailer limited editions at a maximum of 100 units, but that doesn't mean that a year from now or several months from now we don't do another run. Or maybe we produce one new model a year. There's a number of different directions we could go regarding future projects. Franklin Christoph, as well as Jonathan Brooks, have been great partners for this project. With the limited number of pens, there is the potential of them selling out within a short period of time. They will go on sale at figboot.com at noon Eastern on Saturday, July 9th. Now, this is not a pre-sale. The pens are already made and are sitting at Franklin Christoph and just waiting for me to let them know how many of each nib there will be. When you place your order, you'll be instructed to select your nib of choice. I like doing it this way because then every customer gets the exact nib they want rather than having a specific number of nibs of each unit. This might come down to the last couple of units and you really want an extra fine, but all that's left there is a stub. I want to make sure that everyone gets the nib that they want. Once the sale is concluded, in a matter of a couple of days, Franklin Christoph will affix the nibs, and then I'll have everything in my possession probably 3 or 4 days after the sale is, when at that point in time, I can get to work on packing everything up and shipping everything out. I would anticipate that everything will be shipped approximately a week to 10 days after the sale concludes. So the pens will be in the hands of customers rather quickly. This is not like a Kickstarter that is going to take months for your pens to arrive. And just so you know, you are looking at the fulfillment team. It is me, as it has been with any of my projects. Once I get the pens in hand, I am checking everything. I'm the one packing the pens into the boxes and taking them to the post office. It's important to me that if I am putting my name behind a product, that I have an active part in that project. I want to pull my weight. I never want to feel like I'm just like slapping my name on something and someone else did all of the work. So, if you like this pen, and I hope that you do, I hope that you're able to get your hands on one before they are gone. I'm very pleased with how this turned out. For additional information, you can check out my website, figbooton.com. There will be a link in the notes below. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment here on YouTube, and I'll make sure you get an answer. Okay, now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and a writing sample. So here we go with some size comparisons for the Franklin-Christoph Model 66 Stabilis, and this is the California Sunset. You can actually see in the lights here the Franklin-Christoph engraving there. I like that it's really subtle, that it's not too deep in there. That in regard to some comparisons, well, you know what? First of all, I wanted to show you what the material looked like. This is a partial rod of what the original material looked like. And then this is the pen that Jonathan and I made during that video that we shot. That is his Charleston model. So all three of these are the same material. In regard to a couple of other comparisons, this is what it looks like with, this is the Carolina Midnight. This is the standard Momento Zero model. And then this is what it looks like with the Momento Zero Grande in the Carolina Midnight. And then finally, this was the original Figboot-on-Pens model, and that again is a Momento Zero. This is what it looks like in comparison to another Model 66 that I showed. That was the ice one, the frosted ice, and this was a blue, which was a show exclusive. And then a couple of other pens. Here it is with a Visconti Divina in the Desert Springs. And then finally, here it is with a Namiki Yukari Royale. In regard to some uncapped comparisons, this is what it looks like with the Namiki. You can see it's a very long pen. And this is a standard Momento Zero. And then this is the Visconti Divina. Here we go with the writing sample for the Franklin Christoph. This is the Model 66, and we'll just say the Figboot on pens. And this is a medium stainless steel nib. And the ink that I'm using, I thought appropriately enough, is one from Franklin-Christoph. And that is their Urushi Red. This is what the ink looks like. I think I need to do an ink sample for this, or another one, just because I don't like that there's a little blue spot on there. But it's a really nice red that matches up well with a lot of my Urushi, like the Tamanuri pens. This is what it looks like with Stilo and Stile Roman Centurion red. And then something with a little bit more pop to it is the Diamine Poppy red. This is what their bottles looks like. This is actually the smaller of the bottles, and I've almost gone through this entire bottle. So I think I need to purchase a larger bottle of this particular ink. It is one of my favorites. And here we go with the rest of the writing sample. As I mentioned in the review, the Franklin Christoph nibs are always tuned very well, that they are tuned individually before they leave the shop. You're not going to get a lot of line variation out of this Jowo nib, but I've never heard of anyone having any issues with the Franklin Christoph nib, that they are tuned very nicely. The ink flow on this one is decent. In regard to reverse writing, it does a good job. It's not too scratchy. And in regard to some fast writing, the feed keeps up just fine. So here we have the Franklin Christoph Model 66 Stabilis Figboot on pens in the California Sunset. I'm really pleased with how this model turned out, and I hope that you enjoy it as well. Just as a reminder, it will go on sale on Saturday, July 9th at noon Eastern at figboot.com. There's only 100 units, and I feel that they're very reasonably priced. And so I hope that if it's something that interests you, then you'll be able to get your hands on one of these. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.